Storm shelter. The sky above Westbrook City cracked with lightning, unleashing a torrent that transformed the evening streets into flowing rivers. Naomi Bennett clutched her portfolio of grant proposals against her chest, cursing herself for ignoring the weather forecast. Her navy blazer, once crisp and professional, now clung to her shoulders like a second skin. 3 blocks to the bus stop, she muttered, squinting through the downpour. The manila folder was already softening in her grip, threatening to dissolve along with 6 months of work for her youth counseling center proposal. A particularly vicious gust of wind tore at her umbrella, flipping it inside out with a decisive snap. Naomi watched in dismay as it tumbled down the street, joining other debris dancing in the wind. Perfect, just perfect. The gleaming glass tower of Westfield Technologies loomed ahead, its lobby lights a beacon in the darkening storm. Without a second thought, Naomi darted toward the entrance, her sensible heels splashing through puddles that had formed in seconds. The security guard looked up in surprise as she burst through the revolving doors, dripping on the immaculate marble floor. "Ma'am, the building is closing due to the weather advisory," he began, but paused at the sight of her drenched form. "I'm so sorry," Naomi said, attempting to collect herself. "I just need a few minutes until this passes. My bus stop is 3 blocks away and my umbrella—" She gestured vaguely toward the chaos outside. The guard's expression softened. "Well, I suppose—" "It's all right, Thomas," came a quiet voice from behind them. "She can wait upstairs." Naomi turned to find herself facing a tall man in an impeccably tailored charcoal suit. His dark hair was neatly combed back, revealing features that seemed more sculpted than grown. High cheekbones, a straight nose, and eyes the color of a winter sea. She recognized him instantly from the business magazines that littered her dentist's waiting room. Julian Westfield, tech genius, billionaire, philanthropist, at least according to the carefully crafted PR pieces. In person, he seemed both more imposing and somehow more human than his photographs suggested. "Mr. Westfield, I wouldn't want to impose," Naomi began, acutely aware of the puddle forming beneath her feet. "It's no imposition," he replied, his voice carrying the quiet confidence of someone unaccustomed to being refused. "The storm's expected to intensify. The city's shutting down public transportation for the next hour at least." Naomi glanced outside at the worsening conditions, then back at her waterlogged portfolio. Her presentation to potential donors was tomorrow morning. She needed somewhere dry to salvage what she could. "Thank you," she conceded, following him toward the private elevator at the back of the lobby. Inside the elevator, Naomi became painfully aware of her bedraggled appearance reflected in the mirrored walls. Her dark curls had escaped their professional updo, water dripped from her eyelashes, and her carefully applied makeup had surely transformed into raccoon eyes. Julian, by contrast, looked as though he'd stepped from the pages of a luxury magazine. The only hint of humanity was a subtle tiredness around his eyes that the careful lighting couldn't quite disguise. "You're not what I expected," she said, immediately regretting the words. A corner of his mouth lifted slightly. "And what did you expect, Ms. Bennett?" "Naomi Bennett. And honestly, someone more arrogant, dismissive, too important to notice a stranger caught in the rain." There was no defensiveness in his tone, only a quiet amusement. Naomi smiled despite herself. "Something like that." The elevator doors opened directly into his office, a vast space with floor-to-ceiling windows that showcased the storm raging over the city. Lightning illuminated the room in brief, stark flashes. "Welcome to the eye of my particular hurricane, Miss Bennett," Julian said, gesturing toward a seating area near a sleek fireplace. "Now, let's see what we can do about getting you dry." Crossed paths. Julian handed Naomi a plush towel from his private bathroom. "There's a throw blanket on the couch if you need it," he said, moving to a minimalist kitchenette tucked into the corner of his expansive office. "Tea? Coffee?" "Tea would be wonderful, thank you." Naomi dabbed at her face, grateful that her portfolio had suffered more than her appearance. She surveyed the office, all clean lines, muted colors, and strategic lighting. Modern art hung on the walls, likely worth more than her annual salary, yet something felt missing. There were no photos, no personal mementos. The space felt more like a magazine spread than a place where someone actually worked. Your office is beautiful, she said, though a bit impersonal, Julian finished, bringing over 2 steaming mugs. It's functional. That's one word for it. She accepted the tea with a grateful smile. Do you spend a lot of time here? Most of my waking hours. He settled into the chair opposite her, his posture relaxing slightly. What about you, Ms. Bennett? What brings you out in this apocalyptic weather? Naomi glanced at her damp portfolio. I was meeting with potential donors for my project, a youth counseling center in Riverside. Julian's eyebrow raised slightly. Riverside? That's not exactly a prime location. That's exactly why it needs to be there, Naomi replied, a hint of passion breaking through her professional demeanor. Riverside has the highest rate of teen homelessness and substance abuse in the city. These kids need someone in their corner. And you've appointed yourself their champion? There was no mockery in his tone, just genuine curiosity. Someone has to be, she sipped her tea. I was one of those kids once. A social worker named Mrs. Patel changed my life when I was 15. I'm just paying it forward. Julian studied her with new interest. Most people don't circle back to their troubled beginnings. Most people haven't seen what I've seen, Naomi countered. What about you? Westfield Technologies doesn't exactly scream passionate about social causes. A flash of lightning illuminated Julian's face, revealing something vulnerable beneath his composed exterior. Before he could respond, the lights flickered and went out, plunging the office into darkness. Only the storm's intermittent lightning provided any illumination. Backup generator should kick in, Julian said, rising from his seat. When nothing happened, he sighed. Or not. The storm must have affected the building's systems. Now who's apocalyptic? Naomi teased, her voice floating through the darkness. Julian's soft chuckle surprised her. He found a flashlight in his desk and placed it upright on the coffee table between them, creating a soft glow that cast long shadows across the room. In this intimate lighting, the sharp edges of his features softened, making him appear younger, less guarded. To answer your question, he said, settling back down, no, Westfield Technologies isn't known for its social impact. That's something I've been reconsidering lately. Why? Legacy, perhaps. Julian stared into his mug. I built an empire that connects people across the globe, yet I can't remember the last meaningful conversation I had before this one. The honesty of his admission hung between them, unexpected and raw. Well, Naomi said gently, we have at least an hour until the storm passes. Plenty of time for meaningful conversation. As the rain continued its assault on the windows, they exchanged stories. Julian speaking of the pressures of inheriting his father's failing company at 25 and transforming it into a tech giant. Naomi sharing her struggles to convince donors that troubled teens deserved second chances. The system sees them as statistics, not people, she explained, her frustration evident. Every time I present my proposal, I get the same response. Laudable goals, Ms. Bennett, but the return on investment isn't clear. Business minds, Julian said, a hint of self-criticism in his voice. Always quantifying human value. And what do you think? Naomi challenged. As a business mind yourself? Julian met her gaze, the flashlight casting dramatic shadows across his face. I think people like you are rare, Ms. Bennett, and any investment in your passion would yield returns beyond calculation. The power flickered back on, breaking the spell of their conversation. Naomi checked her phone and realized nearly 2 hours had passed. The storm had weakened to a gentle rain. I should go, she said, gathering her things. Thank you for the shelter, Mr. Westfield. Julian, he corrected, walking her to the elevator. And Naomi? Sometimes the right investor just hasn't found the right cause yet. As the elevator doors closed between them, Naomi couldn't shake the feeling that something significant had just occurred, something that transcended the chance meeting of 2 strangers in a storm. Hidden truths. The Riverside Community Center buzzed with the controlled chaos of Naomi's weekly youth program. Teenagers sprawled across mismatched furniture, some engaged in art therapy, others huddled over homework. In the corner, 16-year-old Damon, her newest and most resistant participant, sat alone, headphones firmly in place. Progress report? Asked Valerie. Naomi's colleague and the center's only other full-time counselor. The grant committee rejected our proposal, Naomi sighed, watching as Valerie's shoulders slumped. Said our metrics weren't convincing enough. That was our last shot this quarter, Valerie whispered, careful to keep her disappointment from the teens. Without that funding, I know. Naomi squeezed her friend's arm. But we'll figure something out. We always do. 3 days had passed since the storm, since her unexpected encounter with Julian Westfield. She'd replayed their conversation multiple times, struck by the loneliness that seemed to shadow him despite his success. She'd even drafted an email thanking him again, but deleted it, unsure if their connection warranted further contact. Ms. Bennett, the center's administrative assistant, approached, holding an envelope. This just arrived by courier. Marked urgent. Inside was a letter on Westfield Technologies' letterhead, requesting a meeting to discuss potential philanthropic opportunities. Naomi's heart raced as she read the signature. Julian Westfield, CEO. 2 hours later, she found herself back in the gleaming tower, this time dry and composed as she was escorted to a conference room rather than Julian's private office. Julian rose when she entered, looking somehow different in daylight, more accessible, though still impeccably dressed. Ms. Bennett, thank you for coming on such short notice. Your letter was intriguing, she replied, taking the offered seat. Though I have to admit, I'm curious why the CEO of Westfield Technologies is suddenly interested in a small community counseling center. Our conversation made an impression. Julian slid a folder across the table. I looked into your project. Your approach to trauma-informed care for at-risk youth is innovative. Naomi opened the folder to find a detailed analysis of her program, complete with projected outcomes she hadn't even calculated herself. You did this research in 3 days? I have resources at my disposal, he said simply. And what I found impressed me enough to make you an offer. He outlined a funding proposal that would not only save her current program, but finance her dream facility. A dedicated youth counseling center with residential capacity for emergency cases. Why? Naomi asked when he finished. This is incredibly generous, but we both know there are more prestigious causes that would give you better publicity. Julian's expression shifted, revealing the same vulnerability she'd glimpsed during the power outage. May I show you something? He led her to his office, but instead of stopping at his desk, he continued to a small door hidden in the wood paneling. Beyond it lay a simple room containing a single framed photograph and a weathered journal. My sanctuary, he explained, gesturing to the photograph of a smiling woman with kind eyes. My mother. She died when I was 13. After that, my father... Julian paused, searching for words. He was a complicated man whose business always came first. I essentially raised myself. He picked up the journal. This was hers. She worked with troubled youth before she married my father. It was her passion, one he discouraged as beneath their station. Naomi remained silent, sensing the significance of this revelation. I found this after my father died 5 years ago, Julian continued. Reading it helped me understand why I built this company into what it is, always chasing success but never feeling fulfilled. He returned the journal to its place. Your work, Naomi. It reminds me of her unfinished mission. You've been funding youth programs anonymously, Naomi realized, pieces falling into place. That's what you meant about reconsidering your legacy. Julian nodded. My public persona serves the company, but privately, he shrugged. Let's just say I'm trying to honor her memory in ways my father never would have approved. In that moment, Naomi saw him clearly, not the billionaire CEO, but a man seeking meaning beyond the empire he'd built, haunted by a childhood where wealth couldn't compensate for absence. I'll accept your funding, she said softly, but on one condition. Name it. No more hiding behind anonymous donations. These kids need to see that someone like you believes in them. That success doesn't have to come at the cost of compassion. Julian hesitated, then extended his hand. Deal. As they shook hands, the contact lingered a moment longer than necessary. An unspoken acknowledgement of boundaries crossed and truths revealed. Ripple effect. The headlines dominated local news. Tech billionaire Julian Westfield announces major investment in youth mental health initiative. Business analysts questioned the strategic value of such philanthropy, while social service organizations celebrated the unprecedented funding for a traditionally overlooked cause. For Naomi, the weeks following their agreement had been a whirlwind. Contractors assessed the abandoned community center building that would become their new facility. Staff interviews filled her calendar as they prepared to expand services. And through it all, Julian's involvement remained hands-on rather than merely financial. The recreation area should be larger, he insisted during one planning meeting, surprising everyone with his attention to detail. If I'd had a safe space to channel my energy as a teenager, perhaps I wouldn't have hacked into my school system out of boredom. Naomi raised an eyebrow. Should I be concerned about the example you're setting? His rare smile emerged. I'm merely suggesting that constructive outlets matter. Their professional relationship developed a rhythm, Julian offering business acumen, Naomi providing insight into the emotional needs of their target population. Yet beneath their collaboration, an undeniable tension simmered, built on mutual respect, but evolving into something neither was prepared to name. The transformation extended beyond their project. Julian began appearing at community events, shedding his reputation for reclusiveness. Employees at Westfield Technologies noted subtle changes, longer lunch breaks, fewer weekend work demands, a new policy supporting volunteer hours. You're changing company culture? Naomi observed one evening as they reviewed budgets in his office, now softened with a few personal touches. Your board must be thrilled. They're adapting, Julian replied dryly, though some shareholders question whether I've lost my edge. And have you? He considered her question seriously. I've found a different one, sharper in some ways, less cutting in others. Their eyes met briefly before both returned to the spreadsheets. Professional boundaries, carefully maintained despite growing personal connection. The true test came at the donor gala organized to attract additional supporters to their initiative. Julian arrived early, uncharacteristically nervous in his formal attire. You clean up well, Naomi teased, approaching in an elegant emerald dress that transformed her from dedicated social worker to commanding presence. As do you, he replied, his usual composure momentarily shaken. The evening progressed successfully until Bernard Whitcomb, one of Julian's longest-standing investors, cornered them during cocktails. Fascinating project. Julian, Bernard drawled, eyeing Naomi appraisingly, though one wonders if personal interests have influenced business judgment. The implication hung heavily in the air. If you're questioning my commitment to Westfield Technologies, Julian replied evenly, our quarterly results should reassure you. If you're insinuating something about my relationship with Ms. Bennett, that's both incorrect and inappropriate. No offense intended, Bernard backpedaled unconvincingly. Simply an observation that you've seemed distracted lately. After Bernard retreated, Naomi exhaled slowly. Is that a common perception? Does it matter? Julian countered. It does if it compromises what we're building, she said carefully. This center can't succeed if it's viewed as some billionaire's vanity project or, worse, the result of personal entanglement. Julian's expression hardened. I've spent my career being judged for ruthless efficiency. Now I'm criticized for showing humanity. Perhaps the problem isn't with my decisions, but with others' limited perceptions of success. Before Naomi could respond, they were interrupted by the event coordinator announcing dinner. The moment passed, but its implications lingered. The undeniable truth that personal feelings were complicating their professional alliance, creating vulnerabilities neither had anticipated. Later that night, as guests departed, Julian found Naomi on the terrace, watching the city lights. I've never properly thanked you, she said without turning. For the funding? It's merely capital well allocated. No. She faced him finally. For seeing value in these kids when others see only liabilities. For proving that wealth doesn't have to isolate. For changing? I'm not the only one who's changed, Julian replied softly. You've started dreaming bigger, taking risks you wouldn't have considered before. Naomi smiled. I guess we've affected each other. The admission hung between them, neither willing to explore its full meaning, yet both recognizing its truth, that their chance meeting had created ripples neither could have predicted, transforming not just their work but themselves in ways that couldn't be undone. New Horizons. 6 months later, the Westfield Bennett Youth Center opened its doors. The renovated building featured counseling rooms, emergency housing units, recreational spaces, and educational facilities, a comprehensive approach to supporting troubled youth that had already become a model for similar initiatives across the state. Naomi stood in her new office, surrounded by framed photos of successful program graduates, including Damon, who now volunteered as a peer mentor. On her desk sat a small crystal paperweight, Julian's gift at the ribbon-cutting ceremony. Engraved on its surface were the words, "For those who build bridges where others see only chasms." A knock at her door revealed Julian, looking more relaxed than she'd ever seen him in jeans and a casual button-down. Since the center's opening, he'd scaled back his CEO responsibilities, appointing a president to handle daily operations while he focused on strategic direction and his expanding philanthropic work. "Ready for the board meeting?" he asked, leaning against the doorframe. "Almost. Just finalizing the 6-month metrics." Naomi gathered her materials. "The residential program's success rate is even higher than we projected." They walked together through hallways filled with artwork created by program participants. Staff members greeted them both by name, no longer surprised by Julian's regular presence. Their partnership had evolved over the months, developing a comfortable cadence that balanced professional respect with deepening personal connection. They'd carefully navigated the complex terrain of their relationship, mindful of power dynamics and public perception, yet increasingly honest about their growing feelings. "I'm considering expanding the model," Julian said as they entered the conference room. 3 more centers across different districts," Naomi smiled. "Your mother would be proud. Our investors are certainly pleased. The community impact initiatives have improved our corporate image significantly. Even Bernard has stopped questioning my judgment. Funny how humanity can be good for business after all," Naomi teased. The board meeting proceeded efficiently, with unanimous approval for the expansion plan. As members filed out, Julian lingered, uncharacteristically hesitant. "There's something else I wanted to discuss," he said once they were alone. "A personal matter." Naomi felt a familiar flutter of anticipation. Their relationship had reached an inflection point. The carefully maintained boundaries between professional collaboration and personal connection, increasingly difficult to justify. "I've been offered a visiting position at the university," she said, preempting him, "teaching social work methodology." Julian's expression registered surprise, followed by genuine pleasure. "That's wonderful. Will you accept?" "I'm considering it. It would mean stepping back from daily operations here, focusing more on training the next generation of counselors." She paused. "It would also resolve certain complications." Understanding dawned in his eyes. The perceived conflict of interest, among other things. Naomi met his gaze directly. "We've been careful, Julian. Perhaps too careful." He moved closer, the professional distance they'd maintained dissolving. "Are you suggesting we've denied ourselves unnecessarily?" "I'm suggesting that life is too short for artificial boundaries. That sometimes the most unexpected connections prove the most meaningful," she smiled. "And that a certain billionaire might consider asking a social worker to dinner, not to discuss budgets or programs, but simply because he wants to." Julian's smile transformed his face, erasing the last vestiges of the isolated man she'd met during that fortuitous storm. "Naomi Bennett, would you join me for dinner tonight? No spreadsheets, no grant proposals. Just us. I thought you'd never ask. Later." As they walked through the center's garden, where teens were planting vegetables for the community kitchen, Julian took her hand discreetly. "You know," he said, watching the young people work, "that night when you arrived dripping in my lobby, if someone had told me where that chance meeting would lead..." "You wouldn't have believed them," Naomi finished. "No, I would have feared hoping for it," he corrected softly. "Some storms change the landscape permanently." Around them, the center hummed with activity, evidence of their shared vision brought to life. Before them stretched possibilities neither had imagined 6 months earlier: professional expansion, personal connection, and the profound realization that sometimes the most meaningful journeys begin with seeking shelter from unexpected storms. "To new horizons," Naomi said, squeezing his hand. Julian's answer was a smile that promised both adventure and sanctuary, the perfect reflection of the bond that had grown between them. Unexpected yet inevitable, challenging yet natural, a connection that had transformed them both and would continue to evolve with each new chapter they wrote together.